I used to think that if something was truly wrong, it would announce itself, with raised voices, with slammed doors, with a moment so obvious you couldn't explain it away. That's not how it started for us. Her name is Megan, mine is Thomas. We had been together for 9 years, married for 5, long enough to stop introducing each other as something new, but not long enough to feel old. Our life looked clean from the outside, predictable in a way that felt earned. That morning began like any other. Coffee brewing, light coming in through the kitchen window, Megan standing barefoot on the cold tile, scrolling through her phone while pretending not to notice how late it was getting. I remember thinking how normal everything felt. That's the detail that stays with me now. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. I said yes. She nodded, already half somewhere else, and kissed my cheek without pausing her movement. It wasn't distant, it wasn't cold, it was efficient. I didn't register that at the time. On my way to work, I replayed the morning the way people do when they're bored, not suspicious. Nothing stood out. No sharp edges. No missing pieces. If anything, I felt relieved. Relieved that things were calm, that whatever stress we'd been carrying lately seemed to have settled into something manageable. I didn't know yet that calm and numbness can look identical from the inside. The first message from Megan came around noon, just a photo of the dog asleep on the couch, taken from an angle that suggested she was already home. She added a single word: finally. I smiled at my phone, showed it to no one. It didn't occur to me to ask why she was home so early. That evening, I came back exactly when I said I would. She was already cooking, music playing quietly in the background. She smiled when she saw me, a real one, unforced. We ate together, talked about small things, things that don't matter until they're the only things you talk about. At one point, her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't look at it. That was new. She used to check immediately, always said she didn't like unanswered notifications, that they made her anxious. I noticed the change. I dismissed it just as quickly. Later, when we were sitting on the couch, she rested her head on my shoulder. Her weight felt familiar, grounding. I wrapped my arm around her without thinking. This, I remember thinking, is what stability feels like. I didn't know then that stability can also be a pause, a holding pattern. That night, as we got ready for bed, Megan mentioned she might have to work late the next few weeks. Nothing urgent, just a lot going on. I said I understood. I meant it. Lying in the dark, listening to her breathing even out beside me, I felt something close to gratitude for a life without chaos, for a relationship that didn't demand constant attention. I didn't realize that what I was grateful for was silence. And silence, I would later learn, is only peaceful when it's shared. That was the last day everything looked normal. The changes didn't arrive all at once. They came disguised as adjustments. Megan started coming home later, not dramatically late, just enough to require explanation. She always had one ready. Meetings that ran long, a coworker who needed help, traffic that somehow felt worse than usual. I listened, I nodded, I adapted. That's what you do in a long relationship. You adapt. She stopped sending photos during the day. No more updates, no casual check-ins. When I asked how her day was going, she answered politely, efficiently, like she was reporting, not sharing. I told myself this was normal, that adults get busy, that closeness doesn't need constant proof. Still, I noticed how careful she had become with her time, how conversations ended sooner, how often she said she was tired, not physically, but in a way that closed things down. One evening I suggested we go out, Nothing fancy, just dinner somewhere that didn't require reservations or effort. She hesitated. Not long, just a beat. She said maybe another night. She had an early morning. That early morning came and went. She didn't leave the house any earlier than usual. I didn't mention it. I began paying attention to moments I used to float past, the way she angled her phone away from me on the couch, the way she laughed softly at something she didn't explain, the way she seemed both present and slightly elsewhere at the same time. It wasn't secrecy, it was separation. There was a night I woke up and realized she wasn't in bed. The clock read just past midnight. I found her in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, her phone in her hand. She looked up quickly when she saw me. She said she couldn't sleep. I said neither could I. We stood there for a second, unsure what to do next. Then she smiled, stood up, and followed me back to bed like nothing had happened. But something had. The next morning, she was warmer, more attentive. She made breakfast, asked about my meetings, kissed me before leaving in a way that felt deliberate. That confused me more than distance would have, because distance makes sense when something is wrong. Closeness, timed precisely after absence, feels like correction. I found myself thinking about her more during the day, not missing her, monitoring her, wondering what version of her I'd come home to, the tired one, the distracted one, the suddenly affectionate one. I didn't like that version of myself. I told myself I was overthinking, that suspicion was corrosive, that trust required restraint. So, I restrained myself. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I noticed a shirt I didn't recognize. It wasn't new, but it wasn't old either, something she could have bought weeks ago without mentioning. I held it for a moment longer than necessary, then I folded it and put it away. That night, we sat across from each other at dinner. She talked about work. I listened. I talked about mine. She listened. On the surface, everything functioned, but beneath it, something subtle had shifted. We weren't reacting to each other anymore. We were managing impressions. And for the first time, I wondered whether the problem wasn't what Megan was doing, but how easily I was learning to live without asking why. At some point, the changes stopped feeling abstract. They started feeling directed. Megan began asking more questions about my schedule, not suspicious ones, practical. What time I'd be home, whether I had meetings after work, if my plans were flexible. I answered without hesitation, but I noticed how carefully she filed the information away. It was a new attentiveness to her listening, not curiosity, calculation, as if she needed to know where I'd be, not because she missed me, but because the timing mattered. I told myself that was unfair, that I was projecting meaning onto neutral behavior. Still, I couldn't unsee it. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, lights off except for the kitchen. Megan's bag was on the chair, her keys beside it. She wasn't home. That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. I sat down and waited, scrolling through my phone without reading anything. Minutes passed, then more. When she finally came in, she looked surprised, not guilty, not defensive, just momentarily thrown off. She said she lost track of time. I said nothing. She filled the silence with details, too many, where she'd been, who she'd seen, how long it took. I listened and realized something unsettling. I hadn't asked for any of it. That night, she fell asleep quickly. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling again, the way I'd started doing more often lately, and thought about how trust changes shape, how it stops being a given and starts requiring effort, not to build, to maintain. A few days later, I saw her smile at her phone again. This time, she didn't try to hide it. It was subtle, almost private, like a thought she didn't expect to be witnessed. When she noticed me watching, the smile didn't disappear. It adjusted. She asked if something was wrong. I said no. That was the moment I understood that whatever was happening no longer depended on whether I knew about it. It depended on whether I was willing to name it. I started paying attention to myself instead of her, to the way my chest tightened in ordinary moments, to how I avoided questions that might alter the tone of the evening, to how quickly I accepted explanations I didn't fully believe. I realized I wasn't afraid of losing Megan. I was afraid of what confronting her would force me to admit about us. It was a night we stood in the kitchen, close but not touching, both reaching for the same glass. Our hands brushed. She looked at me, really looked at me for a brief second. In her eyes, I saw something that surprised me. Not guilt, distance. As if she had already stepped somewhere I couldn't reach her easily anymore. That's when I understood the difference between suspicion and awareness. Suspicion asks questions. Awareness recognizes answers you don't want yet. I didn't confront her that night, but I stopped pretending I was imagining things. And once you stop doing that, everything feels sharper, heavier, unavoidable. The first time I almost asked her, the moment passed. We were standing in the hallway, both of us tired, the day already folding in on itself. Megan was kicking off her shoes, moving with that automatic efficiency people develop when they don't expect conversation. I opened my mouth. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw it in her face. Not fear, not guilt, but anticipation. Like she knew what was coming and had already rehearsed surviving it. That stopped me. I asked instead whether she wanted tea. She said no. That night stayed with me longer than it should have, because it wasn't about what I didn't say. It was about what she expected me to. A few days later, the opportunity came again, this time without subtlety. We were having dinner, the TV off, the room quiet enough that every sound felt amplified. Megan was unusually quiet, pushing food around her plate without really eating. I asked if something was wrong. She said she was just tired. I asked if she wanted to talk. She hesitated. Then she said, "About what?" That's when I realized how far apart we already were. I told her I felt like she'd been somewhere else lately, not physically, emotionally. I said it carefully, deliberately, like I was testing the temperature of the room. She didn't interrupt. She listened. When I finished, she didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She said she didn't know how to explain what she was feeling without sounding ungrateful, that she hadn't planned anything, that nothing had been decided. Those words landed heavier than a confession would have, because undecided meant ongoing. I asked if there was someone else. The room went very still. She didn't answer right away. And in that pause, I understood something important. The answer mattered less than the fact that I had finally asked. She said there was someone she talked to at work, not in the way I was imagining, at least not at first. Conversations that felt easy, honest, uncomplicated. She said it hadn't crossed a line. She said she hadn't wanted it to. I listened, my body strangely calm, like it had already adjusted to the impact before my mind caught up. I asked how long it had been happening. She gave me a timeline that explained everything I had noticed, the late nights, the careful scheduling, the shifts in attention. I asked whether she still talked to him. She said yes. That word didn't echo, it settled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even feel angry in the way people expect. I felt clear about the fact that something fundamental had already changed, whether either of us liked it or not. She asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I didn't know yet, but that I couldn't pretend this was nothing, that even if nothing physical had happened, the distance between us was real, and it was growing. She nodded. She said she understood. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, an invisible line between us that no one had drawn, but both of us respected. As I lay there, staring into the dark, I realized something unsettling. The fear I had been avoiding wasn't of losing her. It was of finally seeing us clearly. And now that I had, there was no going back to the version of our life where questions stayed unasked.
After that night, nothing felt immediate. There was no explosion, no dramatic shift, just a steady, uncomfortable awareness that everything we did now carried meaning. Megan didn't bring him up again. I didn't ask, but his presence lingered anyway, not as a person, but as a possibility, as something unfinished, unresolved, standing quietly between us. We moved through the next few days cautiously. Conversations became slower, more deliberate. We avoided jokes that might feel inappropriate, avoided touching unless it felt absolutely natural, which it rarely did. I began to understand how fragile normalcy is once it's been named as false. One evening, Megan suggested we take a walk. It wasn't framed as a solution, just movement, air, something to do with our bodies while our minds struggled to catch up. We walked in silence at first. The neighborhood felt familiar and foreign at the same time. Houses we'd passed 1,000 times now looked like backdrops to someone else's life. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen like this. I said I knew. She said she felt torn, not between two people, but between who she had been and who she felt herself becoming. That the attention she received hadn't felt like temptation, but like recognition. That word landed sharply. Recognition. I told her that hurt more than anger would have, that it meant I hadn't been seeing her the way she needed, not because I didn't care, but because I assumed knowing her was the same as noticing her. She listened without interrupting. She said she didn't want to lose what we had built, that she didn't want to walk away just because something felt difficult. I asked her whether she wanted to choose us, not out of fear or habit, but actively, intentionally. She didn't answer right away. She said she needed time, not to decide between me and him, but to understand herself without the noise of immediate consequence. That answer made something inside me settle, because waiting, I realized, was also a decision. That night, I slept on the couch, not because we argued, but because proximity felt dishonest, like pretending we were closer than we actually were. Lying there, I thought about how many years we had spent avoiding discomfort in the name of peace, how we had smoothed over tension instead of exploring it, how silence had become our shared language. I realized I couldn't keep doing that. The next morning, over coffee, I told Megan I thought we needed space, not as punishment, not as an ultimatum, as clarity. She looked relieved and sad at the same time. She said she agreed. We talked about logistics, about where she might stay, about keeping things simple, respectful, open. The conversation was calm. That scared me more than anger ever could have, because calm, in moments like this, often means the decision has already begun. As she packed a small bag later that day, I watched from the doorway, noticing how carefully she folded her clothes, how deliberate each movement was. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't hesitating. She was preparing. And I understood then that whatever came next would not be about fixing what we'd lost, but about whether either of us was willing to live honestly with what we had become.
Megan moved out on a Friday. Not because it meant anything, just because that was when her sister could take her in. She packed lightly, a few clothes, a laptop, things that suggested she wasn't trying to recreate a life somewhere else yet, only pause one here. We didn't stand awkwardly while she packed. I made coffee, she folded clothes, we spoke when necessary. It felt rehearsed, even though it wasn't. At the door, she stopped, looked around the house like someone checking whether they'd forgotten something important, not an object, but a feeling. She said she didn't know what this meant for us. I said I knew. It meant we were finally telling the truth without trying to soften it. She hugged me before leaving. Not tightly, not distantly, just long enough to acknowledge what we had been. Then she left. The house didn't feel empty afterward. It felt quiet in a way that didn't ask to be filled immediately. Days passed, then more. Megan and I texted occasionally, practical things, short updates. Neither of us reached for familiarity. It would have been easy to slip back into it. I realized then how often familiarity disguises avoidance. One evening, weeks later, I found myself sitting on the couch alone, the same place where she used to rest her head on my shoulder. The space beside me didn't ache. It just existed. And that felt important. I thought about the version of us I had been trying to protect, the one that looked stable, intact, successful. I understood now that I hadn't been protecting our relationship. I had been protecting the idea of it. Megan didn't leave because she wanted someone else. She left because she had already left in smaller ways, long before either of us named it. And I stayed because staying felt safer than asking what we were becoming. We met once more, a month later, for coffee. Neutral ground, daytime. She looked calmer, not happier, clearer. She said she was learning to listen to herself without translating everything into something acceptable. I said I was learning to ask questions earlier, even when I wasn't ready for the answers. We didn't promise anything. We didn't close the door dramatically either. When we parted, there was no sense of unfinished business, just an understanding that whatever we had needed to become something else, or end, had already done so. I walked home alone and realized something quietly grounding. The end of a relationship isn't always marked by betrayal or anger. Sometimes it ends when both people finally stop pretending that silence is the same thing as peace. I don't know where Megan and I will be a year from now. What I do know is this: if I ever find myself in a life that looks calm but feels distant, I won't wait for proof. I'll trust the discomfort. Because ignoring the first sign doesn't keep things intact. It only delays the moment when honesty becomes unavoidable.